My patented old description of man, just temporarily for our purposes, being described as being run by these three general areas of circuitry, which is better done. Those of you who have seen the one that Richard did for me once of the triangles drawn in 3 dimensions, or drawn with perspective on a flat piece of paper with the 3 triangles of different colors interlocked. All right, there seems to be much that you can map, or I have mapped about man's operations that fit into this, and there seems to be much about man's operations that seem to be explainable in a sense, at least partially, by reference to this. And I have pointed out that, as most of you who have been around for a while know, that what I call the yellow and the blue and the red circuits in man is what most people refer to as the mind, the intellectual side of man, and then the feeling side being the blue circuit, and the red be, I guess, his complete physical life outside that, all of his motor skills and all of his physical habits and etc., his intrinsic health. Now, can any of you see that these circuits, not just my circuits, but then let's take the fairly well-established division of man into an intellect, emotions, and into the body, whether we are calling them my yellow and red and blue circuits or not. But can you see this in a sense as being simply measurement? That's all it is. Three-dimensional measurements, and yet they're known and accepted as being such things as man's or my intellectual life. And it's a measurement. I have an emotional life. Everyone does. Blah, 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 about feelings and my likes and dislikes. And it is a measurement. It is a three-dimensional measurement of man. And then on a larger scale, it appears to be a three-dimensional measurement of life. You simply look at the yellow circuit as being the height of something. This is just one possibility. The blue circuits as being the width of something. And the red circuits as being the depth of it. What I think measures in a certain way. What I apparently feel is a measurement that life uses in a certain way. And then the way I behave, the way in which I move about in life, measures things in a certain way. If you can begin to see it in a certain way, it's as though life has made men when they say such things as I think and I feel, that they have taken that which is too vague and they have made it usably precise for life. All right, let me try another direction. Theoretically, when they try to make up such characters in literature, they condemn a man who apparently has no strong persuasions. In some instances I can recall of my casual perusal or knowledge of fiction throughout history, characters will show up that seem to be even worse to the authors, that is, some part of life's body at that time, almost worse than patent villains, is a character somewhere who is denounced because he has no opinions. A struggle is going on between the people and some tyranny between two groups, and this guy says, I don't care. Who cares? Too vague. And of course they're always a minor character and something always happens to them. And they're always identified because of their unusualness. I'm not going to say their uniqueness. Their unusualness. That's for you old-time Lexo nuts that I refuse to play along. It is too vague for a man to have what? Feelings that are unspecified. It is too vague. Life, what kind of report is that back to life? If somebody says, are you familiar with such and such problem? You say, yes. Have you given any thought? Yes. And what? I just gave it lots of thought. And what conclusion did you have? I had none. Well, you didn't think about it. Oh, I thought about it. I'm thinking about it now. Yeah, but did you think about it in such and such way? Yes. In fact, did you read such and such report they put up at? Read it twice. And did you read so-and-so's criticism of it? Yes. And the commentary that another group wrote? Yes. And what was your conclusion? Didn't have any. What kind of report is that? That is not a report. All the many ways, I'm trying to drag you here since my opening statements didn't seem to have a widespread concussive effect on some of you people here. Every time a man says, I think, every time a man says, I feel, which if you'd like to take out a second, and you contemplate what is exempt from those two categories, that is when you're talking. I guess you could say I believe, but that fits into one of them. Every time a person says that, you could look at it from all sorts of angles if you wanted to. If you thought it had some importance, you could look at it in the city from an attempted psychological, sociological. What do people mean? You could lay as an attempted intellectual inquiry. What's the basis of a person here saying, I think so-and-so, and the person right next to him say, I think otherwise? What if all that's irrelevant? What if what seems to be the several distinct, these three main categories I'm saying of man's operations, rather than being something in themselves like I think, and forget Descartes, I think because I am, or I think because I have to, or I think because I'm French, is I think because I've got to measure, and I feel. And after that, it's of no great importance to say, well, about this one area, about this area of which I am now measuring, of which I am conscious, my feeling measurements are, which would be a better way. It would be a more precise way of saying, I'll tell you how I feel about it. It's a measurement. Now the sticky part that I don't think any of you felt when I first pulled it is not simply some of what I was pointing out last time we met, of man continually measuring, or of consciousness being a measurement tool. What I'm saying is the actual circuitry in you. When you say, I feel, you don't feel. You measured something. But everybody's concerned. Those who are concerned about their feeling are all concerned about their feelings. But why do I feel this way? Sometimes I feel badly about the way I feel. Sometimes I think I shouldn't feel this way. Sometimes I feel like I shouldn't think about this so much. Sometimes I feel as though I am not physically attractive. Sometimes my behavior, regardless of what I say, sometimes my behavior makes me feel ashamed. What is all of that saying? With ordinary people, it appears to be that all of that has some personal significance. If not, the city would fall apart. If not, there would be a real revolution amongst everybody. That if everything I feel, everything I think, and everything I do, you mean has no personal significance to me, which of course you can't make an ordinary person see that. But if you could, just remember, if you could make them consider the possibility that's true, what would you have on your hands other than the big U, the big uprising? Nobody would like that, I suggest to you. No one in the city would like that at all. But how about all of the historical discussions apparently out there, and all the historical discussions in you about why do I feel some way, and why does somebody I love, or somebody to whom I am closely genetically connected, how can I feel one way and my mother be such an abject socialist when she knows that I'm a Republican? How can my husband, how can my wife think such and such? How can the people around me, some large group of people, how can my community apparently behave in such a way when I just know, I can feel it, that it's improper? Such is the basis of history, such is the basis of man, literature, opera, everything. And it seems to be inexplicable. Thus we have all the attempted explicables. Religion, philosophy, common sense, and just general running of the mouth between people. What if, just for you few, if you begin to see that the very operations that apparently give rise to all of this. I talk about what I think because I have a brain, I have a mind. And I talk about what I feel because I have, at least allegorically, a heart. There's a spirit to me. I am a human, I am cultured, I am semi-civilized. I have some talents and appreciation of art, beauty, morality. And of course I am a physical being. I like to eat, I like to exercise some, I like a little sex now and then, I like to lay down. And all of these seem to have a personal significance. But there seems to be a running eternal conflict, all the way from little teeny conflicts to real teeny big conflicts between peoples. Can you see the very distinct possibility, not philosophically, but to what seems to be the very functions in man, that you could look at thought at any given time as it's measuring the height of something? And then even coevally, but it seems to go in sequence that just a split second later that you're feeling about something, and all it is measuring the width of it. A person, an idea, your past. And then later it's like, well, that's enough talk, I'm going to take off and do something. And apparently just your actions with no particular thought given to it, at least no comment made, and no particular feeling of emotion about what you're doing. And all you're doing then is measuring the depth of something, some aspect of life. It would answer, as I catch myself almost repeating, even me, I suggest that it could answer a whole lot out in the bushes. In the city they can't hear it. As I said, in the city it would cause a real revolution. And never mind my old play around talking about allegorical revolution. You'd have the pigs doing an attack on Hormel and Oscar Mayer like you wouldn't believe. You mean everything that I felt, everything that I've done, doing 1,000 sit-ups for 2 years, starving myself, going to school at night, trying to take piano lessons, going to an analyst to try to get over my hatred of, well, everybody. And you're going to tell me that it was just absolutely useless? Now, I didn't say absolutely. I don't put adjectives in my mouth. Is that a synonym for overlooked humor? It's measurement. The human brain is not only a measuring device, its operations are measurements of you. And if there was a heart, as they used to like to draw, that is, a little emotional equivalent of man's brain, which of course is up in the nervous system, but if there was a separate little soul, little heart, that was his center of feeling, the seat of all his emotions, it's not simply that, although that's simple enough, it's not just that when it's expressing itself, when it's feeling that it's measuring apparently something. The feeling in the person is a measurement of the person. And of course behavior is behavior. You are measuring the person as you behave. That is, that without comment. As your movement, where you stand, your apparent health, as opposed to what might be your real health, which is the same thing, but it seems to be apparent health of people. I tried to point out to you last time that one way to look at consciousness as being a measuring device is that that which would be the infinite and that which is too vague cannot be measured, is incomprehensible, and for certain obvious purposes, whether obvious to you yet or not, life cannot use them, or else life would not have people cutting off infinity at the knees. It would not have consciousness taking that which, in a sense, for a few people, you can find for yourself, that which seems to be normally quite specific, you can tolerate, to say the least, and perhaps live with, and perhaps even learn more from, letting it be vague with non-specific outlines, but life cannot. And so consciousness has to deal with the infinite, what could be the infinite, and what could be the too vague, by making it otherwise. And how does it do it? It does it with what seems to be the functions. It does it with what I've been calling the yellow, blue, and red circuits. It makes the too vague usably specific. It turns the infinite into that which is finite, to say the very least. It in fact turns it into real teeny little portions. Because that's men's brains, if we're going to use consciousness in one sense as being yellow circuit activity, is it always cuts it up into little teeny portions, because the average city brain only has a real teeny little appetite. It has a little teeny stomach and a little teeny digestive system and little teeny colons, and so it can only take little teeny informations. see if you can take one more jump. In one sense, I could describe the three circuits, these three measuring devices, both apparently measuring out there, but being a measurement itself of in here, of the person. I could describe them again, as I have once or twice. Let's just call them brains for a second. Not literally the physical brain, at least not limited to that. Could you see, in a sense, to expand that which is already shrinking upon us as I stand here, based upon you people? We won't let that stop us on tape, will we? Because I would have to exert mystical powers to see how much it's shrinking on you 3 weeks from now to do it instantly, and I don't think I'll do that, so I'll press on. You could look at man as having what would amount to a dual three-dimensional brain, or you could look at it as being three brains split. And I'm not talking about the left and right-hand brain that you're talking about now, because I can't talk about that since it's out in the common currency. I'll have to wait till it dies down. I know a bunch of you have kept hoping I was going to talk about that, or that I've been talking about it and calling it something else. When information seems to rise, and especially terminology out in the city, I can't deal with it. I'm not going to deal with it because it's a waste of time, because too many of you go, oh, I already know what that is. And see, I can only present stuff to you that you got no idea what it is a lot of times. In which obviously I'm succeeding tonight. Look at the three circuits in man as being three brains, three operational centers. Let's call them three brains, and they are split. And they're split thusly. In the younger upper region, the yellow, what you would have it split into, yellow still doesn't show up very good, does it? Well, play like I'm writing in yellow. You can play like everything else. It would be like the first brain would be split into this. The middle one would be. And the older lower one would be this. They're still measuring devices, but I'm trying to drag you off on a side step. You could look upon, for a very distinct purpose, not me just making it up, but you could look upon the three circuits, three brains, as being split. And that one that seems to be, that I've been referring to as the yellow circuit, that I admit is what most people think of as being their intellect, their seat of human thought, could be divided up into thinking and action. And that which seems to be a man's emotional life, wherever the seat is of his so-called emotions, that is split up, as it were, into feeling and action. And then if there was the ability to separate all of this, whatever would be left, just a man's lower, baser, nonverbal, older, almost primeval instinctive life of the body, could be divided up into action and action. It is thus that a man, let us say in the first instance, in the upper story, that a man can think of acting. He doesn't think of thinking. You think of acting. That a man can either think of acting or he can act. A man can feel about acting. A man doesn't feel about feeling. They don't. They feel about acting. And they may feel that they wish they could act different about the way they feel. But feelings do not feel about themselves any more than thought thinks about itself. Thought does not think about acting. Now thought, at least you get, I shouldn't have to keep wiping everyone's nose, but at least any of you would listen to any voices and you and try to stop here and argue and say, well, the mind can think about that should be better educated. Right. It can think about reading another book. It can think about talking to a famous, intelligent person. It can think about going back to school. But the hardwired mind, the circuits of man, and the physical brain itself in the city, cannot, theoretically for a second could go out, I'm going to think about thinking. Here I go. I'm thinking about thinking. And then it's gone. I can say, well, what purpose? And you go, well, I don't know. You just said I couldn't do it, so I did it. I'm thinking about thinking. I'm doing it right now. You said the words, I'm thinking about thinking, but the mind does not think about thinking. All right. It thinks about action, or it could result in action. The feelings do not feel about themselves. People do not say, I feel real bad. And I'll tell you why I feel bad. Because I am a depressed kind of person. So, I can feel about feelings. No, you're feeling about acting. There is no depression unless you act depressed. You're thinking about the way you act. You're thinking about, or conversely, you're thinking about the way depression seems to act upon you, which is action. The feelings do not feel about themselves. They feel about acting. But down at that level, we can still split it up that they can feel about acting or apparently act based upon feelings, not thought at that time. This is in the upper yellow story. It can think about acting or it can act. And the reason I'm splitting it, remember, all three, I didn't put one action beside all three. Each one has its own action possibility. In the first instance, they can think about acting, or in that instance, think apparently based upon the measurements thinking just gave them. Or they can feel about acting, or act based upon the apparent measurements that their feelings gave them. The lower instance, the bottom line, we're all good by the bottom line, is action with no thought or no feeling, as opposed to the first two instances. It is somewhat of a conundrum physically or verbally have to describe it, but it would be the reality of good physical, of that brain in operation when you hear it said, which is a difficult because it wouldn't say it, but when you hear that kind of person, that kind of brain say, hey, I'm sick of all the discussion, I don't know how you people feel, fuck it, let's do something even if it's wrong. What that means is let's do something no matter if anybody thinks it's right, no matter if anybody feels like it's decent. The time's come to do something. That is the basis. Of course, the difficulty is, I was saying verbally, is that part would not even say that. But I'm saying that is the basis of that kind of term, that kind of conversation. But it's on the basis of action. Not thinking of action, not feeling of action. And the way this comes out is, it's either action without any thought or feeling, or it's non-action, like couch potato time, nap time, with no thought or no feeling. Now, none of these is always, truly, just to point out to you again, do not exist in some kind of pristine isolation. The human organism, you don't have to take my word if you can study yourself at all just for a split second, it is not that you're continually switching on and off and that suddenly you're just thinking, and then suddenly you're just feeling, and then suddenly you're just moving and acting around. But it is worthwhile, I wouldn't do it even up until now, of making these kind of artificial separations because they're a kind of extraordinary map. It's mapping areas that does not normally lend itself. It is not mapped out in the city, it's not discussed in this way. But you can see specifically, and it should point you in other directions to realize that if you look at, for this ad hoc conversation, if you look at what seems to be the thought process, the feeling process, and then just the way in which you behave at the times that you behave, and it seems to not be directly connected to, dependent upon what you normally think or what you normally feel, that you're just doing something. If you look at it as being, as it were, three brains, but they are split, and there you stand at any given time to speak about in isolation artificially, that you can be thinking about acting and then apparently act that has a direct connection to the measurements, that is, the thoughts you were having. Or you can think about acting and then something seems to happen as it's going on simultaneously anyway, and then you act, but what you do is you're now acting on something that you were feeling. And then right after it's over, an hour later, 2 weeks later, 5 years later, somebody brings it up, and you can become aware of the fact, I didn't intend to do that, that's the way it seems. And yet I did it. And it can happen almost instantaneously that you say something to somebody. And the old feeling of, why did I say that? Or, gee, I wish I hadn't said that. What happened? Are you completely out of control? Are you just an idiot? Are you an inherent dumbass? But everybody does it in the city. I knew when I turned around and said, hey, you can't talk to me. I started to do that, and I just had almost a picture. I knew that when I did that, I could just feel me. I wasn't surprised I was going to trip. When I fell over and broke my leg that night, when I was going to hurt that guy, I just, I don't know, I shouldn't drink or I shouldn't get mad. I just knew it. But it does not, it cannot make any sense in the city. It's not useful info if you look at it linearly. How could I know that? Then you start getting into discussions with yourself or somebody else or some kind of metaphysical flash. How could I know that was going to happen? There's no explanation for it. Worse than that, if that is true, as I feel it is, that I just almost knew it was true, it was going to happen, I got even a worse question to ask good old me. If I knew that, why in God's name did I do it? And why have I done it before? And had the feeling, just there I went down the stairs, and just, I wasn't surprised. I was mad. I was cursing at somebody. But I wasn't surprised. Linearly, it makes no sense. You are left with those kind of goofball ideas that history has always had in the city, that, Art, you had some kind of mystical experience. Spirits of your departed ancestors, angels, somebody's hanging around you. You saw the future. You know, I don't normally see the future, but it was nice. I guess I did. That's what happened. You saw the future. You got measurements going on simultaneously. And from one of the brains, let's call it still right now, that the operations are split up into them either acting based upon what they seem to be responsible for initially, that is either thinking, feeling, or just acting. But what seems to be in human conversation and human thought after the fact, that what I did is not tied to what I said I wanted to do, or what I did was not tied to what I feel about that situation, or what I did was not even profitable to me. I hurt myself. What I did, I never really thought about, and I hadn't discussed it, but I don't like that. And I did it, and I've done it before. Maybe next time I should think about that. I'll try and remember that. Next time you don't remember it. Next time you apparently don't think about it. Oh, I forgot. How could you forget doing something that broke your leg twice? How could you forget something that gave you a double hernia? Oh, I don't know. I just forgot. Isn't that dumb of me? I should take a memory course. You might as well. Can you begin to see that all of this being in a kind of continuum, that all of this is in operation at the same time? It is making measurements, and they can, any parts can be talking, as it were, to themselves. And it doesn't, I don't mean verbally now, but they are making measurements, and they are in the yellow circuits, in the yellow realm of measuring. They're thinking about acting, that possibility, or the possibility of attempting to act based upon the yellow circuit activity, that is, the thoughts about acting. Or simultaneously now. I shouldn't really say or. It's just that all three are not necessarily operating at the same intensity all the time. But the blue circuits, what you're feeling, can either be you feeling about acting, either in the past or in the future, or actually acting on what appears to be the impetus, the basis of what you were feeling. Or you could be acting with no thought or feeling. It's acting on the base of totally nonverbal action. But they're all in operation, and what seems to be the light of consciousness can fall upon any of the three. But what seems to be city, contemporary consciousness, is very quickly rounded up into the tongue and the lips. At least the tongue and the lips in here, of you making a report to you of, God damn, why did I do that? Or, of course, God damn, why did they do that to me? Or, Jesus, why am I doing this again? That which is acting, if there was somebody inside, if it were true that, if you remember that joke, well, it wasn't a joke, there are actual signs on these coin machines that say, if this machine takes your money and malfunctions, please don't be on the machine, the owner's not in there, call such and such number. And then I think it was Kyrut then asked the question, if that's true, and it normally gets a little laugh, people go, well, how true? Then why do people keep beating on each other? And then if you laugh after that, it's supposed to, that you at least fill in, if you don't like it, you fill in what Kyrut probably meant. that means you're beating on somebody and the owner is not in there, which is a little spooky. But if you understand that the owner, that is Mr. Hormel, Mr. Meyer, Mr. Blackhawk, is not inside, the owner of that person, of course you should be looking in a mirror, but the owner of that person is not in there. And you can beat on that other machine all you want to. You can shake it. You can talk to it. People talk to machines. You've seen that. You've probably done it. Be on a telephone in your great philosophical manner, probably based upon some of my good influence. Holler, you son of a bitch. Don't shake the phone. People do it to each other. And then, of course, the real interesting part for this kind of activity is how you beat on yourself. But it's all on the basis, why would anybody shake a Coke machine and beat on it and talk to it and holler at it? Although it sounds ridiculous, they're assuming that somebody's in there, right? Even in the city, people are not dumb enough, are they, to beat on a machine and holler, give me my money back, and the machine go, oh, okay, you caught me. Here's your damned old quarterback, just quit beating on me. No, they don't believe that. They obviously beat on it and talk to it. They believe that Mr. Coca-Cola's in there, I guess, or Tom's Potato Chips, that there's a Tom in there, and you keep beating, he's finally going to say, what? Who's there? What is it? Why did you awaken me? But people do the same things to each other on the basis that the owner's in there. Now in the city, as always, this is all useless, but now most of you have been around long enough on a clear day, you can't see forever, but on a clear day, if I say the owner's not in there, and you think, and you feel, right quick, that based upon everything I've been through thus far and the little glimpses I've got, you're right. There ain't no owner in me. They call my name, I turn around, I look in the mirror, and I know it's me. And something seems to be happening in my experience with this. But as far as there's an owner inside of me, that he's in there, she's in there, that is very, very vague. That is very inspecific. And the more you see right quick, it almost gets close to being an infinite problem. Is the owner inside me? Well, I guess you could say yes, and then I guess you could say no. Well, you're being a little vague. Is the owner inside? Is the owner in there, hiding out, somewhere? Which I suggest to you is a beautiful example of being too vague. And if you can understand too vague carrying to even a greater extreme is the infinite. It is the totally inspecific. It is a non-reportable report. And so obviously, people operate on the basis that the owner is inside. The owner is inside everybody else. In the city, everybody assumes that. It is wired in, you operate on that basis. Life, you should be able to glance around. Life requires reports continually, even from its furthest corners. But from a revolutionary view, you've got to see that you personally do not necessarily have to be the overseas correspondent for Bulgaria or Mongolia or Belize. Well, it's a little warm there, but at least Bulgaria. And by Bulgaria and Mongolia, I don't mean any offense to those countries, I mean offense to you. Because in life, I was picking Bulgaria as like a no man's land, or who wants to go to Bulgaria? No offense to any of you Bulgarians. It's not Bulgaria, it's where you are in life's body. Now, ordinary people in the city, they think, well, it's where I am internally. You're talking about what kind of thinking goes on in me, what kind of feeling goes on in me, how I behave. No matter what's going on, all the way from my little example night before last, of you laying there by yourself in your boxer shorts, drinking a warm beer, and comment to the TV, well, no wonder the Lakers not doing it better. If old manager so-and-so would get off the money, and if he'd gotten such and such players back during the draft, and you even say it out loud, and you can laugh and think, so what, everybody does it, and you can say it's of no consequence. That may well be, if I know, or if you just want to guess, in the great cosmic eventual working out of the equations, if life is it's a great construction project of which you're obviously a part, whether the Lakers won or lost, much less what you thought of it. You may look far and wide, you may not live long enough, even the infinite might not be enough time to find any trace in life's final project, if there was such, of this, that had any bearing whatsoever. It was just like truly superfluous noise. Information came through the project. There it is, all those humans toiling in life's project that is this. And just like carpenters, ballet dancers, writers, there's a seminar, there's mechanical, useless talk that apparently has nothing to do. The carpenter's in charge of laying the foundation for this thing, and they're discussing women, baseball. Just little sketches at a time, 10 seconds at a time. You can say, well, it had nothing to do with it. But it had to have something to do with it, or they wouldn't have been talking. Well, it didn't have anything about them doing to build that foundation. All right, make all carpenters quit talking about pussy and booze and movies and sports. You know what will happen? You'll be living in barns again and trees. They can't work. That's simply the way it is. You don't understand that. And I don't mean just them. You can say, well, why do we support at all? Why do there government grants to have international meetings between intellectuals, between physicists and medical people? And I went to go to some of them because we offer grants. Me as a good taxpayer, some of my money is going for these seminars. I flew over to Copenhagen and followed this last convention, the International Convention of half-awake physicists. And I found out they were having meetings like 3 hours a day, and the rest of the time they're out chasing women, or else staying around talking about God knows what, and they're playing chess, and they're drinking. Let's stop it. Let's make them do just what they're supposed to do. Okay? The world of physics would just, you can replace it with carpenters. Life has got to, back to where I started, have reports. And it is getting continual reports from the furthest corner back to News Central. Not just you laying on the couch making some comment about why the Lakers are probably going to lose the playoffs completely. Not only that, but some guy, some woman, a yak herder in outer Mongolia, barely literate, is laying down next to his dung fire that night, trying to go to sleep. Out from nowhere, nobody even knows his name except his immediate family. And just before he nods off to sleep, he thinks, I wonder how the Lakers are doing tonight. You can, with some three-dimensional justification, look at all this as being, hey, that's got to, in the greater scheme of things, I guess you would call it in the city. In the greater scheme of life, that sort of information, if I insist on calling it information, which I do, it's energy, it's matter, it's energy, it's information. Life requires that to some degree, but to say it has any lasting pertinence, that it has any immediate pertinence, you can forget it. Three-dimensional wise, it may almost be nothing. But the backfire of a car, a fart, a tear, a speck of dust, a feather falling from a bird out of a tree, it all has some height, width, and depth. And it is there. It is a part. It is stuff. And stuff does not come from nowhere. Culture, the so-called environment, stuff only comes from other stuff. These reports come from people. People come from life. People are working on the project. They just don't know it. People are part of the project. So life is requiring all of these far-reaching reports continually, like sitting there, Information Central. And it's getting reports from an unknown yak herder, and it's getting reports from a man with 3 degrees over the seminar in Copenhagen. After his drinking and that woman is with, he may have 105 degrees for all I know. All the way from that to you. Just driving down the street and seeing a billboard saying, buy so-and-so, trust such and such insurance company. And you go, right. All of that is a continuing report to News Central. And it's necessary. Once you begin to see that, it's just there in front of you. Once you begin to see that, again, these kind of ideas that all humans must have in the city, that most of the world, or at least a good portion of it, is made up of dunderheads. Useless people. Who cares what somebody, those who are not interested in sport, who cares not only about who's going to win the NBA championship. Not only who cares about that, but how can you even care about people who care about it? Jesus! The world going to hell, people starving, our churches crumbling, morality crumbling, and there are people out spending big bucks and talking about, worrying about the NBA playoffs. If you understood that part of man's responsibility in this great, unseen, unrecognized construction project with a capital P, remember the project I told you at one time I was going to tell people about and I never did until I, don't count what I told you as actually telling you, but when I told you about the project, remember the project is where the big P, remember the fence and the sign, the little doorway? It says the project, and the fence keeps going up. In the project, of which man is part of it, in this great construction, this unrecognized, unnamed construction project, life has got to have, because it does have, just look, it does not have idiots just because you think they're idiots. You do not have useless people just because you feel that they're useless. It's reports coming in that you haven't been assigned to. It's stories being reported that's not a part of your job description. And so reports are coming in on sports, and hey, sports is useless. Let's get into something important like the arts. And somebody over here says, the arts, it's politics. Who cares about the arts? I don't mind music, but hey, you're not going to go out and play a violin concerto and make a tyrant give it up. Politics. The rest of you people are wasting your time. They're not. Life is requiring these reports. Everything that a person, every individual, everything they feel, everything they say, and everything they do is a report. They're doing their job, and you can't go quit. They had no choice. Now, of course, if you want to get dirty, in the city, at conscious level, line level consciousness, you are doing the same thing. But all your complaints, all the judgments you have about the inferiority, the uselessness, the misdirection of other people, you're useless. You're misguided. You're an idiot. They're sending in reports. Life has got to have reports from the furthest, the most far-flung area of its domain, which I guess you can catch on a little bit, takes in every domain. The question then is it necessary that you continue to be that sole, almost impotent reporter from Bulgaria, from Snookville, Mongolia? Is it absolutely necessary that there you sit in an outpost, nearly forgotten, an overseas correspondent to say the least? That is, everybody feels as though I'm away from my homeland. You don't know what your homeland is, but everybody feels, if you can hear me, that they're an overseas correspondent, that somewhere they've sent me from my homeland, as witnessed by the great stories throughout the world of the downfall of man being thrown from the Garden of Eden, being thrown out of paradise, that I am not where I belong, I'm in a strange land. And it forces me to make reports. I don't know where the hell they're going, I'm making measurements. Of course, this is all my terms. I am living a life, and I am in a strange country. You're an overseas correspondent at an outpost, nearly forgotten, sending in information that you never hear from again. It's like hauling in an infinite canyon. You never hear back that good work, good going. We could use that. That was great info. We got to turn the tape over. Well, let me ask you this. Just from a very passing, unusual, ad hoc position, could you look upon this kind of activity, whatever this may be, as best you can make of it right now? Should you, or should you be looking upon this as a kind of positive new growth in the body of life, or more like a long-established kind of antibodies helping to fight off certain evolutionary illnesses? I would predict in my semi-mystical manner one of the things I asked you the night before last, our last taping, about what if, just what if, what everybody believes in the city, throughout history, just ordinary people, what if what they believe about man and life, what if that's right? And all this, not just me, but everybody else that you've imagined, whoever you thought was something similar to this, the Buddhas and all that people of history, that they were wrong. Now, we're way past an era of just simply binary right and wrong. Maybe I'll go a little bit further. But rather than all that, are there being not just secret knowledge, if that's too crude, which it is, but if there are other ways of looking at things outside the general scheme, the general intellectual scheme of things as perceived by just ordinary people, your next door neighbor, bricklayers, city workers, politicians, that rather than a few people such as yourselves, just feeling and believing that there's other possibilities. You could be conscious in a different way. You could develop your inner self, your spiritual self, in such a way that your thought processes would be keener or more magnanimous, or you would have a greater feeling for humanity. In other words, that there's at least the possibility that a few people could do something out of the ordinary. What if that is just total nonsense, whereas the few people involved with that believes that the people in the city, that is, the majority of humanity, 99% of humanity, just go about their old dumb work and they never think about anything, they never try to expand their feelings or their outlook, their perception of humanity, and they're wasting their time. They're somewhere, great cosmic forces, if not actual God, somewhere somebody's going to disapprove of this, because I know personally, I can feel it, says the ordinary person, that there's more potential in man. We don't use our brains, they can wire it up. They even know that in this century, that we're not even actively using much of our brains. It's just not firing up. It's just laying there. Just a bunch of... And these people in the city don't recognize it. They just stumble through life trying to pay off their bills. That's not right. You know, maybe it's none of my business and I can't change life, say these philosophers, these spiritualists in the past. You. But this, at least for me, and a few right-thinking people, this is the way to go to try and explore, to try and develop ourselves beyond just that mundane rat race norm. What if you're almost an illness? That is, what if everybody else is right? What appears to be, from certain views, this dumb, robotic, half-asleep, struggling through life, kicking over things, tripping over things, hurting people you love, loving people who hurt you, just being generally dumb, about half-conscious. What if that's exactly what life needs, and they are exactly right. If there is reward and punishment after life, those 99% are all going to be in paradise, doing this. There's going to be some of you people, and those philosophers and spiritual thinkers and all that, they're going to be cast off somewhere. God knows why. I guess watching eternal reruns of the Dukes of Hazzard or something. All right. I know that when I do such... I know that when I pull out and get in certain areas like this, as I've done once or twice in the past, I do know, I can predict it beforehand, that some of you measure that almost as by your own little internal Richter scale, that it shakes you up. That's, I wish you wouldn't say things like that. And you people in other times and other places getting this on tape, if you've seen a few tapes before and beginning to take this serious, my prediction is some of you could even feel worse about it. Like, is he making some kind of subconscious, perhaps, admission that all of this is a bunch of malarkey? That's Irish scientific talk. No, I'm not hinting at anything like that. Although there is something I've never discussed, and I guess I will tonight, that I have labeled to myself as the impossibility factor in the 3D world and almost in the 4D world, but I don't think I'll bother you with that, because I don't think any of you would care to be bothered with that. I don't mean that I don't know it all, but there is the impossibility factor in the 3D and almost 4D world. I'll give you this hint. I'm awfully close to talking about it right now. At any rate, this rhetorical question I ask you is, what if what humanity has always believed? Just look at the minimal, the average level of humanity, the dunderheads, the unwashed masses, just the average Joe and Jill. no great thoughts, no feeling for their fellow man, just the dickheads of life. That's Scandinavian scientific thought. What if, when I say they are right, of course I don't mean that they've sit around in some way figured this out, but what if that portion of life's body is manifested through the 99% of humanity? What if that's exactly right, as opposed to life finding some great favor with these little heroes that pop up historically in little groups of people that apparently, at the expense of them getting rich and famous themselves, seem to be on some quest to raise up the general level of human consciousness or human decency or culture, human intelligence. What if that's backwards? I'm not trying to upset you, but that is tied to what I was trying to get you to consider when I was asking for a specific reason. Not to upset you, and there's no secret message here of the kind you could imagine that I've already tried to verbalize for you, that I'm trying to give you some message that this is not what it seems to be. Because if I went further with that, or you went any further, you'd be confronted by the impossibility factor. But should you, could you involved with this, look upon this activity as being a kind of new positive growth in the body of life, which would seem to cover it, whether you use my terms in the past, my descriptions up until now, or even that description. All of you who might be interested in this will just assume. Would go, hey, if I just said, is that not a good description? Most people go, well, that's fair enough. But I'm not saying, is that not a fair description? I'm asking, is it possible to look at it this way? In fact, should it be looked at as being the positive new growth in life's body, or as a kind of well-established, although not necessarily looked at, measured, and named in that manner, but a well-established collection, continual collection of antibodies in life's very body that's in charge of warding off, fighting off certain evolutionary caused illnesses. Now, I can be real crude right quick and say, well, which one of those do you personally like? Those of you taking this sincerely know that, at least theoretically, I hate to say, that I've got some other purpose in bringing this up. But do you feel, now that I've given you two possibilities, that your interest, the way you feel about this, what you think that this is all up to, what you think I'm up to, I don't mean just personally, but me involved with this, is it really new growth like new brain cells? If we look at life in an anthropomorphic sense of life being the big guy, and that we're in him somewhere, then surely, we assume the big guy still is a huge reflection of humanity. Then he's got brains, he's got a nervous system. Then this kind of activity surely is in his brains. Human life must be in his brains. The upper part of his nervous system, as opposed to boulders, railroad ties, Big Macs, have got to be somewhere down the lower in his nervous system compared to man. But then within man being the higher part of the big guy's nervous system, then people involved with this, like you individually and this collectively, surely is like life itself trying to expand its own awareness, to try and activate areas of its own brain not currently in use. And that we're like life's potential, its intellectual potential, right? No, it sounds good. And it sounds, of course, at real quick blush, no less a deserving and proper description for the likes of us, right? But at least you think that the possibilities I gave, that one of them was positive, one of them was negative, life couldn't live if, again, he's the big guy, just a master, huge, at least three-dimensional, to let your mind deal with it, reflection of us, and vice versa. He could not live any more than you can without the constant, the forever established. When I say constant, of course, didn't want to just use the word old to compare it to me asking for the first part of new positive growth, but well established, that we could be the antibodies that life could not continue to grow in some other manner if we're not it? Not just humanity, but if the kind of people interested in this, if they are not life's intellectual tomorrow, if they are not the new positive growth, and it's going somewhere else that we don't know about, or I'm not telling you about, it couldn't happen somewhere else if life continually was attacked by himself. That is, if he did not have the ability to fight off illness, right? He wouldn't have time to get any more conscious if he was going to die tomorrow from a little pinprick. So what would be more important? What's more important than you? You can say, well, my brain, my personality, my charm. All right. But don't forget the antibodies, or you would not have a brain, a personality, a charm. You'd be done for. A bruise would do you in. So from one sense, what could be more important than that? I'm asking you this, I'll repeat one more time, or bring this up, not as some veiled message I'm sending, but it is proper that you be able to consider such as this. For one thing, if for no other reason, and this is not the sole purpose, if for no other reason, to properly consider such as this requires that you go beyond, obviously, binary thinking. And for you to get anything, for you to be able to take a measurement that has any potential personal profit, you've got to be able to go beyond the three dimensions of trying to measure, well, wait a minute. One of those could be true. If it is, then that means, at least in our case, my case, if I'm not part of the positive growth, then I'm got to be something else. And I could be part of an illness. I didn't even bring that one up. Or I could be part of the antibody groups fighting off other illnesses, evil, the bad guys. You have got to get beyond, obviously, the binary, and then you've got to get beyond the three-dimensional measurements of, all right, we're part of the good part of life, the progressive part, or we're part of the non-progressive. Actually, this is all, in some way, we all got deluded, and we're all, working for evil. We're all working for the downfall of life, and we just don't recognize it. We're all just so blown away by this, and, I've drugged everybody's coffee, including my own. Or, since I brought it up, we might be the antibodies, not necessarily fighting the good fight with the good guys. We're over here kind of on the sidelines waiting for the bad guys to show up, and then we jump them so that the good guys can carry on. That's the kind of people we are. We'll sacrifice ourselves. All right, even those three measurements won't do. And while I'm here, let me insist by asking you, rhetorically again, you do understand that everything in you personally, imagination, fears, dreams, everything in you is three-dimensional. Now, I hit this verbally, I thought quite plainly, not before last, but I'm not here preaching, insisting that you adopt that, but you have got to see that. That's not that far away, or you don't belong here. To see it, and then the problem is, of course, as always, is to starts with an R. Remember, is to remember that. That everything in you, no matter what, every thought, every feeling, and of course, obviously the action, you would say, but everything in you, in man, is three-dimensional. It's in you. There's no such thing as a two-dimensional anything in you. There's no such thing as a one-dimensional. You have got to start having that kind of continuing, running, side reel analysis and understanding of yourself that everything that goes on in you is material, it's molecular, and it is measurable. The feeling that nobody understands me, I don't understand myself. Why do I do what I do? Where did these ideas come from? This is all too spooky for me. Well, you belong back in the city. Because it's not. There's nothing weird going on in you. There's nothing in you that's inexplicable. There's nothing going on in you that is singular. And of course, there's nothing going on in you that's of any goddamn interest. But that's another story. To ordinary people, it is. But boy, am I interesting. But here is a real corner that many of you need to be able to turn. To at least turn it a few times so that you know it's there and you try and keep an awareness of it. that what seems to be your inner life, and my little joke about it's not all that interesting, it's not unusual. There's no difference between your inner life and that styrofoam cup. Or that. When it gets to the reality, and I'm talking about the kind of reality, not something spooky that I can make up, the reality that even means something to line level consciousness. That is the kind of reality that means something to everybody in the city, and that reality is life and death. If it's alive, it's three-dimensional. If it is a part of life, if you feel it, if it apparently is some psychological trauma, if it's some phobia you got, to you, everybody in the city, to you, that is quite different than the size of your earlobe. That we're talking about something completely different. Don't be an idiot, they would say. We're talking about my fears. We're talking about my dreams for tomorrow. We're talking about my love life. We're talking about the concerns I have philosophically for the course our race is taking. And that all of that, and nobody analyzes it, and they're right, I'm wrong. There's no way to prove this to them. It's just wired up, you feel that. That is totally different. It's not even worth discussing. To say it's three-dimensional. You're trying to say it's material. You're trying to say it's measurable. Yeah, it can be weighed. If they had not the right instruments, they got those instruments. If consciousness was such that they knew where to look, it's not a matter of even them fooling around now with the ideas of putting together some final unified. You're trying to say it's measurable. Yeah, it can be weighed. If they had not the right instruments, they got those instruments. If consciousness was such that they knew where to look, it's not a matter of even them fooling around now with the ideas of putting together some final unified theory of the universe, at least right now on the basis of the information they got. The general view is they need better technology. Would bypass the kind of uncertainty principles that the technology we got, when you get to subatomic level, you can't pinpoint where something is and its velocity, for instance. Or that conversely, if that's getting too far afield to your immediate attention, that the progress we have made in describing the universe scientifically has been due to technology of having new telescopes, new microscopes, the new technology to be able to make measurements that the human eye cannot see. Now see, that sounds correct, but it's not true. There's been a change in consciousness, because there had to be a change in human consciousness to invent this. Life changed human consciousness, or we would not have a microscope, an electron microscope. We would not be peering, as it were, into the subatomic level. It's not because of technology. And nobody even thinks. I can say this, and you're still sitting there blank. Most of you are like, well, either that's so obvious you don't know what to say, or else you don't know where it's going. But nobody looks at it this way. They can't. But what they're saying is, it's as though almost one day, all right, maybe it took 2 or 3 months, but it's like one day there was a scientist, a guy was prepared to do it, because there's no such thing as luck. It's fortune, and then the right preparation to take advantage of it, I think it's been called. But it's like that there was this famous physicist out for a walk, and he suddenly kicked a rock, and under that was an electron microscope. He went out, another one was out one time, an astronomer, and it was like he saw this big old tree that had fallen on something, he kind of pushed it over, and under was the world's largest, most up-to-date radio telescope. You went, wow. Of course, that sounds silly. Then you think, well, it was a matter of all these people working, putting together bits and pieces to invent and develop the technology that is now an electron microscope. Do you understand they did not have electron microscopes in 1640? And don't tell me the literal description. They did not have them back then because they didn't have them back then. They did not have them back then because man was not conscious in the way he is now. Life did not need it. Life was not requiring the kinds of measurements and reports that required an electron microscope. What somebody in 1640, the world's greatest thinker, was Galileo alive then? Whoever was the world's greatest thinkers, all the scientists, whatever they were in the 1640s, the reports they were seeing to life, or I guess maybe let me jump back a little further, at least into the 1300s, they were reporting to life, hey, the sun goes around us and we're the center of the universe, to use that old ploy. That information now, of course I don't know whether any of you have gone this far to get really aside, now that's laughed at. In a sense though, even those of you who've done a little paperback reading of Einstein's and the if you can take quantum measurements and expand it out that everything is relative to the position of the observer, you know, the idea that the Earth is not the center of the universe, ha ha ha, it's as true as it's not, but work on that in your spare time. At any rate, it is not simply that there has been technological progress. That's all right for a city description, but what I want you to see right quick, so I'm not getting you too mired up, is in the 1300s, the reports that life was getting that are now considered to be absolutely fallacious and incorrect. That is, all right, we're looking at these little, we're holding up our, you know, hands over our eyes, and we're getting out late at night, and we're observing, and we believe that the Earth is the center of the universe, just like the Old Testament insinuates. The sun and the stars are all traveling around us. That is now considered to be absolutely false. But at that time, don't you recognize, can't you begin to get a whiff of this? That information, those reports coming from humans, back to the Life Project, this construction project, that was adequate. It was not that life was saying, my God, I wish, what would an electron microscope, what would a telescope do for the guy get better reports? When it needed better reports, it changed human consciousness and people invented. Of course, you laughed at me saying they kicked over a rock and there it was. That is what happened. They just don't recognize it. But they apparently, over a period of time, they developed and invented the telescope because life needed new reports. It needed better measurements. That's it. Internally, the measurements that people now make of themselves are as from the viewpoint of what just a few people on this planet, of what I'm telling you, you can know, what I know. Now, I didn't find it under a tree. I didn't learn it. Life is letting this information out. It always has, to varying degrees. But the reports you're sending back to you, the reports are as bad as believing that you're the center of the universe, believing that everything revolves around you. I'm just picking an obvious parallel to draw. But you are sending back information that is adequate. You're sending back information and reports to you that are adequate for like what amounts to 13th century science. You're sending back reports to you that is adequate to uphold a very shaky structure in the city. And part of the reports that you're sending back to you and everybody else in the city is sending back to yourself is that my inner life is in some way different than that. That what you, that is me, have just said, that your inner life is three-dimensional. That everything you think, everything you feel, your daydreams, your imagination of things that never happen. I've never seen a flying pig, but I can imagine it. And I say that's three-dimensional. It is molecular, it is material, and it is measurable. It's measurable, or you couldn't even think it, and it's three-dimensional. And you say in the city, this is the bad reports you're sending back from the revolutionary view, that wait a minute, a flying pig does not exist. In fact, thoughts don't exist. They're not material like you say. But now I'm having real imagination. A pig with wings flying, there's no such thing. It never existed, so you can't say it's three-dimensional. Is it in you? Yeah, I thought it. I'm the first one that thought it. It's three-dimensional. Don't you understand that? It'd be like having a bucket of water and say, I got a fish in there. But the fish and the water have no relationship to each other. Now I'm going to take away the water, and the fish will stay right there floating in the air, as it were, in the middle of the bucket. But the water's got nothing to do with it. Don't you understand that if you took the water, maybe that's not the best one I ever made up, and you threw the water out, the fish is going to go. If it were not for you, there would be no, in this example, there would be no imagination of a flying pig. This so-called imagination, this 1, 2, or 9-dimensional thing in you, this inner life, it's in a three-dimensional object, you. Don't you understand that it's three-dimensional? It wouldn't be there. If it's in you, it's three-dimensional. What seems to be, at the ordinary level, man's unique abilities and functions, these yellow, blue, red operations, are all absolutely molecular, they're all absolutely material, and if man had the consciousness, I'm saying that some people do, I can. Some of you getting close. These are also measurable. And if they're measurable, they're three-dimensional. Remember that from night before last. I can give you that as a rule if I didn't make that clear enough. That is part of the purpose. That is one of the prime purposes of consciousness. And the only thing the ordinary consciousness can measure, that is the only thing of which it can be conscious, are three-dimensional stuff. So if you can be aware of it, such as a flying pig, a swimming armchair, if you can be conscious of it, it's three-dimensional. And don't say, well, it doesn't exist, it's just my imagination. Your imagination is three-dimensional. A while back, at one time, I mentioned, and I think I even allowed Kairu to say something about this in his own inimitable fashion, that when it comes down to it, ultimately, a real revolutionist, whatever act he's doing, whatever he's doing in life, he ultimately becomes and is his own audience. Does everybody remember that? The day is going to come, if you continue in this, if you are properly drawn here and to the manner born, there's going to be a fine, surprising day that will come wherein you will finally play to yourself. That you'll understand what I meant. Some of you got hints of it now. Some of you have your own way that you've had a piece of experience of this. That you are ultimately in this, you are your own audience. I'm not going to say that you're your own best audience. Oh, hell, I just said that. You are ultimately your own audience. And there will be a time, now it may happen more than once, but you'll know it now that I've given you words. There are other ways I could describe it. There's going to be a time, and it may only take a second, but you're going to understand right then, it's like, to make a real down-to-earth category to say the least, it's like you playing around with showbiz and you think you've been practicing, you've learned some lines, and like suddenly you've been an understudy, you've just been hanging around, and it's suddenly, and a nice show, at least a big audience out there, Broadway, off-Broadway, and it just suddenly, as though you turned around, and this great fear that seems to slow down and make consciousness get in slow time, you realize that somebody's come up behind you, the director, and he's about to push, and you realize a split second from now, I'm going to be on stage. That's about the time you got, and you realize it may be what seems to be a great stressful situation between you and somebody else. It may apparently be triggered by a very minuscule occurrence, but you're suddenly going to have a feeling that here it comes. I'm about to either play to myself or probably play this thing out. In other words, I'm probably going to die from stage fright. I don't mean that literally. I'm probably going to make such a fool of myself that me and this is done forever. That this is either the end or I'm about to play to an audience that is me. And that's it. Comma. I wasn't through. I brought this up to drag it toward an area in which I'm close to already tonight. A real revolutionist, you will find out, again, some of you, I believe, will already taste this as soon as I put words on it. A real revolutionist just hates to use anybody else's material. Now that's got a few chuckles, and by use other people's material, I assume you people are hip enough in your own inimitable way that you understand I was kind of using showbiz terminology and measurements. Like a comedian, that a real good comedian, a revolutionary comedian would just hate to use anybody else's material. He could hear something great. He could hear something that was so funny that his thought may be, God, I wish I'd written that. But a real revolutionist would almost die before he'd use it. I don't care if he heard it done in Los Angeles and 2 weeks later he was playing in Snookville, Mongolia, at the Buddy Yak Comedy Club, and he figures, I don't see anybody here that has a California tan. And I believe I'll go ahead and slip in. That joke was so good. Nobody he'll ever know. A real revolutionist. May I remind you, we're not talking about Mongolian comedians and comedy material. But the comedian, if he were a real revolutionist, would so hate to use somebody else's material. Let me tell you how much a real revolutionist hates even the possibility of using somebody else's material. A real revolutionist almost, I know this is going to sound funny in the 3D world, he almost can't stand using the same words everybody else uses. You know, back in the city, what I perceive, or I have seen some mention of in the past decade or so, that there's some 3D psychologists, even some 3D psychologists, I guess, / feminists, have made a kind of accusation I've heard described that men's masturbation is a kind of yellow circuit rape. Of course, I can't imagine the feminists even being close enough to have any idea what they said, because they almost told the truth in a certain way. But that kind of solo sexual activity by a man, like a playboy, is a kind of yellow circuit rape of the woman's picture. But I hadn't changed the subject yet, folks. Think how much more sticky is the recycling, that is the raping, but the recycling of other people's ideas. Have you already forgotten I told you that you should never think the same thing twice? But God forbid, Larry forbid. For those of you who don't know, some around here, I got that started somewhere, that they decided if there was a God like your forefathers believed of all the great Judaism and Christianity and etc., that I hinted that his name was Larry, and so it just got out of hand. I was going to insist that some of you could be able to, already on your own, to feel my words, but you should feel the experience, an aversion, not an attraction to, mimicking somebody else's ideas, using cliches even. That's, some parts of life's body really condemns that, and other parts of life's body. I don't mean people involved in this activity. People that say you shouldn't use cliches, it shows that you're too lazy to think, and etc. That's just fairly run-of-the-mill yellow circuit activity back in the city. But I'm telling you that there's a basis for that kind of, from the very least in some quarters, negative feeling toward people who continually speak in cliches, or who seem to use them too much. But I have even taken a little further throughout the last several years. I pointed out to you that there is a certain kind of distaste that you should feel. I think I put to you originally, I know I did, scratch I think, that I ask you, why is it that people, even those apparently with some reputation, those with some credentials, that even the more credentials, the bigger the reputation, that they continually refer to other people in their writings, but in their speeches. They'll continually say, well, as Abraham Lincoln said. And the way things are structured in the city, those who would attend such lectures or those who read such books, it's all, of course, a dance. It's not one person tricking a group or vice versa. But it's as though this shows the intellectual wherewithal. What, that the bastard can read a book and, take somebody else's quote and say, that'd go good here. I was talking about people mistreating each other, and Abraham Lincoln says something like that, or George Washington, or Nietzsche. And they look back up and it says something that a man who would do so-and-so would do so-and-so. And so the guy says, he's talking along, and then apparently just extemporaneously, like he knows this many quotes, he says, well, as Nietzsche said on this very matter. And many people in the city will lean a little closer like, my, what an intelligent man. He's going to tell me what somebody else said. All right. As always, the point of this is not to make fun of the way things are in the city, because they don't need me to do that. You people, and not just verbally, not just so that somebody else hears you, but you should not be thinking other people's thoughts. You should not be laying around, men or women. I guess the day's coming that women are getting a little more up to date. You should not be laying around with your door locked and closed and holding up a book of Greek philosophers and doing naughty things. That is, thinking what they already thought. You might also see from a revolutionary view another mark on the nay side of criticism in general. Because all criticism, how can you be a critic? All criticism is based upon what? People having done the field in which I'm interested, having all done it before. They've got to have already done it. But now I'm here, by tongue or pen, to uphold truth, justice, and to cut through all the bullshit and show how they missed the mark. In a sense, it's of no great importance, but in a sense, criticism, which life needs, is reports from parts of its body. But from the revolutionary view, criticism of all kinds, professional, paid criticism, and then of course all of the suckers in the city, they do it for free. All forms of criticism are just like an extreme three-dimensional example of recycling what everybody else has already thought, or at least what somebody else has thought. If that would accomplish anything, why weren't you all Buddhas of some degree before you got here? Didn't you read all the important books? Didn't you even write down some of the great quotations? And didn't you at times even sprinkle your conversations, throw in little footnotes back in undergraduate school of even books that were not required reading? Perhaps even the professor noted, didn't he? Yeah. And the output of all this, the outcome, simply playing with yourself again. If you're going to be your own audience, which I'm telling you ultimately you are, you will not abide by you using other people's material on you. Not if you're a revolutionist. You'll go, boo. You will run yourself off stage. That is, you will never reach the final scene for this. You won't even get close. Because there you are, your own audience, and you will not abide this kind of shoddy showmanship. Because I've heard all that before. I heard it from the source. I read it in the original Greek. I don't need this. I've even thought that before. Don't come out and tell me this. This is the best I can do. Freedom to the Christians. I mean, freedom to the lions, of course, is what I meant. You recall back earlier when I was describing a way in which you could look upon there being a three-brain field of operation in man, and the three brains being split into not only the three major areas of me describing the brains as being in charge of thinking, feeling, and action, but then each one split into like thinking, and then thinking of action, and then action itself, and feeling of action and action itself, and action itself. Connected to that is something I brought up several weeks ago in another context. I don't think enough of you, sometimes I do these if you think it's not important, but if you think I just do something with a real hit and run and just threw it out because I suddenly thought about it because I thought it was slightly humorous. But I threw it out and didn't see much reaction or anybody to really hold on to it, so I'm going to do it, use it again, because it's still a great example. That is, the prime example I find right now that in our part of the world is the media news programs on TV, especially local and network news. But let's say local, they seem to be really getting on it the best. And it's this: they've got, say, a 30-minute news program. Now, I've never timed it, but I assure you it's increasing. I remember when it first started. But now it's increasing quarterly, or at least yearly. And it's this: it's the teasers, that is, the previews of what's coming up. The show, they'll say it's 6 o'clock, and here's channel 17, 23, and the news is coming on. And show two people, and one person say, well, Mark, would you tell us what the stories are coming up? And I've never timed it, but they'll spend some time, 30 seconds maybe, which is a lot in 30 minutes. But they'll spend 30 seconds saying what's coming up. Then they'll flash on the graphics of the news and who's on here and giving the weather and all that, so they'll kill another minute. And then they'll come on and say, well, the lead story is, and they'll say what it is about Reagan's been in Moscow again, they had such and such thing. And the other person will say, oh, and plus, coming up a little later on the show, we have some footage that was filmed exclusively for Channel 17, just for us, and so-and-so is over there, and he'll be reporting it for us. You know. Little Betty says that, and Mark says, well, thank you, Betty, and we'll look forward to that story. And Betty will say, well, good, Mark, because it's an exclusive with us. And then they'll give a little more news for, I don't know what, a couple of minutes, and then you can tell they're going to commercial. And they'll get through one story, and then Betty will say, well, Mark, when we return, we'll be covering these stories. And sometimes they'll do even flash graphics back here or a piece of the film of what's coming up. And they'll say, 2 children were killed in a fire at such and such place. And then Mark will say, oh, and Betty, and we're going to have a story on Congressman so-and-so is, and they'll spend another, I don't know what, 30 seconds saying what's coming up. Do you follow me? This is not an attack by any means. Hold on to your drawers, you new people. I'm not attacking that. Do you see? And I'm telling you, now that I've mentioned any of you who ever watch the news, you should realize, now that I pointed out, yeah, that's gone just from a couple of years ago, almost non-existent, that now it is, I mean, it's growing. But now, dig this. That's Georgia scientific talk. Just to... Could you see life, the possibility, take this instance, apparently external instance of these news shows, of creating the teasers longer and longer and longer until, in essence, there is no room for the pieces themselves, that is the news, that it starts off, and other than the commercials, it's nothing but continuous teasers, that is previews. Now, could you see any possible use? This may sound strange at first, and so I'm going to hit it and probably leave it for tonight, of being able to use the situation that man alone in this 3D world that you can observe can not only act, but he can think of acting. He can not only act based on his feelings, but he can just sit around and feel about acting. Can you picture any possible circumstance? It'd have to be a particular circumstance that you could take the thinking of action, the feeling of action, that is, the teasers, the possible previews of coming attractions, that is, coming action on your part, and turn that teasing, that preview, that thinking, that feeling of it, under certain conditions, for your own purposes, into the whole show. Well, I'm sorry, time's run out. May we truly hope and trust that none of you have such dumb-witted, loud, serious, wiring voices in you that you would listen to this and say, well, wait a minute, that would be some kind of cheap cop-out. That sounds like the very thing that we should not be doing. That is to sit around and think about something so long that before you know it, it got out of hand and bypassed you. So you're not listening to yourself. That is not what I'm talking about. Because people do that. But notice, now I'm speaking for Jack and Jill public, that, hey, we do that already. People do that. That I sit around and I think about what I should do and I plan about it until before I know it, the whole situation has changed, or the train left before I could decide whether to buy a ticket or not. Right. That is not willful. That is not controlled. That is not what I'm talking about. That happens to people, but that doesn't count. Anything that happens in the city doesn't count. Are we out of tape? You want to stick out another one? Hold on a second. What I'm speaking of is if you willfully, this has got nothing to do with what would happen. That never has anything to do with what would happen. What if you willfully, under certain conditions, I'm not going to expand upon any longer tonight, but it had to be very specific circumstances, and you would have to understand, have some knowledge of what you were doing, that there it is, and you understand that there seems to be time constraints, that I only got so long to either buy my ticket or miss the train. But then you've got to willfully do it. You can't take, as I was again pointed out night before last in response to a question, just because something happens in life, just because people will even talk about something that you think I've talked about, you can't compare the two. Something that could work for you has no meaning in the city. Things that they do in the city that seems to have not the effect they desire, if you know how to do it, you can take very things that everybody else does and do them another way. But notice, it's you doing it. It is not native to you. It is not something that would have been part of your natural mechanical forms of measurement. That this is no importance, or I've done it this way, I would have done it this deep. But under certain conditions, you would have to have some knowledge of it to turn your own little show, that is where the circumstance is, where the situation, into a non-stop. Well, Betty, the next show is, and Mark, after that, we'll be right back, and we'll be deciding whether to take this train. Well, Betty, I look forward to that, and how much are they having to sell the tickets? I believe they are, and you keep on to the point. Well, I'm sorry, I'll be down. We're out of time. And somebody wrote a question in response, several times over the last couple of weeks. I was talking about this kind of controlled, willful, perfected use of anger, using it as a form of self-protection. Those of you who haven't seen the tapes before this, I can't go back over it all. But I had a question, those of you who have seen it, somebody wrote me, and they asked, words to this effect, that this kind of willful control, this kind of anger, I said, that a real revolutionist, if they understood what it was, is not really anger, and it's not really hatred, but it's a kind of use as a form of self-protection, of just the normal flow of blue circuit energy and measurements in the city. And the person asked if Mach exaggerated anger would do for what I'm talking about. And the question is just so apropos, and may hit some of you that you might have wanted to say something similar, but the whole point is, anything that is willful and controlled is Mach and exaggerated. Once you get a glimpse of it, I'm not laughing at the question or the person who asked the question, but to say, well, can I use Mach, fake anger? If you see at all what I'm talking about, that's the only kind there is. That's all I'm talking about. It's got to be fake. Now, it doesn't mean that you don't feel like, well, all right, somebody's hurt me. And here it is, I'm going to be hurt by it. All right. That's real anger, right? That I'm mad because they did that. That's real anger, right? Well, that's real anger with a little r. But I'm talking about real anger with a big R. Our kind of anger is you have got to abandon that, and then you've got to fake it. What I mean by such times, I hate to use the word willful, although I have been of late because it has so many city, goofy connotations, but I assume by now that you people know that I mean something else. I don't mean just, well, be a big trooper and a big boy and just steal your way through it. I mean something else, and part of, it's a decent synonym for willful, is Mach. That this is not naturally how I would think, this is not naturally how I would feel, and this is certainly not naturally how I'd behave. Therefore, it's willful. That is, it's a sham. This is not the me that I know and love. This is not the me that's already been measured and cut out. This is not the me that many other people have me measured as. So it's always Mach, and it's always exaggerated. It can't be otherwise. If it's otherwise, it's not controlled. It's controlling you. It's got to be unnatural. It can't be controlled. It's got to be exaggerated. Well, that was really all I had to add for putting that tape on. I will leave you with one, since I guess some of you found it unsettling for me to leave you last time with that question about what if what everybody believes about life is right, just right. Do you like to have the endings of tapes for me to insinuate, lots more spooky stuff? If I can insinuate, I'm just going to give you a little something like, what if? I can break some of my own apparent rules and say that this might have something to do with something. What if? Now let me put it to you another way. Just a question. I'll just make it a question. And then those of you who want to think that it might be really, really basically, even four-dimensionally, potentially spooky, and those of you who don't, I guess you surely have all taken some cause to note that Kairut, Moi, and other fictional characters that I have attributed some of this stuff to, seem to have indicated, all the way from hinted to indicated to outright stated that you got no business talking about yourself. And I've approached it from so many ways, and plus it is so close to the corner, right around from three-dimension land, that many of you already feel that it's no longer just something I say that you're trying to adopt. That many of you feel, yeah, there's no doubt about that. I should not be talking about myself. Should this ever talk about itself? If you want to, trust me. Think about it. And think about, has it ever been otherwise?